Okay. No injuries, everyone's safe. That's a good start to any presentation. So my name is Mark Powell. I work for TDI SDI International Training, and I'm going to talk to you today about ISO standards, partly. As Martin said, standards are a good thing, but it's not enough to fix the problem entirely. Now, who is a rebreather diver? Put your hand up if you're a rebreather diver. Okay. Anyone thinking of buying a rebreather? Okay, I'll try not to put you off too much. Those of you that are not rebreather divers and are never going to be rebreather divers, I'm also going to talk about just teaching in general as well. So hopefully everyone will be able to get something from this. So if I'm going to say that ISO standards are not enough to solve the problem, well, what do I mean by the problem? What is the problem? So some of you, I know, were at Rebreather Forum 4 earlier this year, and Frauke Tillman started off the presentation with a summary of the problem. If you weren't there, the videos are available online. Frauke is one of the ones that's been uploaded. Really worth watching this video. And a summary of the statistics that Frauke presented were that there have been 241 rebreather deaths since RF3. So that was in 2012. So that's 2 to 4 deaths per 100,000 dives. Now, interestingly, that's about the same rate that Dr. Andrew Falk presented at RF3. So we're still getting a large number of deaths. And the risk of dying on a rebreather is higher than open circuit. Okay, we can debate the exact numbers. Okay, and just to keep Gareth happy as well, it's not just deaths. Fatalities are not the greatest measure. I think the number of near misses is probably, well, is definitely way higher and is probably at a similar rate. So Dan put out an article probably about 5 years ago now, and they said these are the 10 improvements we want to see in diving in general. Okay, which I thought that's a really good idea. So I'm gonna come up with the 10 improvements that I'd like to see in rebreather diving, okay? So these are the general ones, and I thought, actually, no, I'm going to stick with those. Weighting, buoyancy control, instead of gas planning, I put bailout planning, better ascent rate control, increased use of checklists, and having the right checklist, and then the second 5, better understanding of cell behavior. We've seen lots of instances where people don't understand what their cells are doing. More attention on emergency skills. So I've got a great idea. Why don't we just take all these things, put them in a standard, and make sure that they're taught to all rebreather divers? Fantastic. Problem solved. Like Martin, was Mark Caney, and there's a couple of others. We've all been involved in writing some of these standards, and the great news is we've solved the problem. Everything is going to be okay from now on because we've just said in these standards, don't make these mistakes. Okay, we're going to tell you what you should be doing, and then you won't make these mistakes anymore. Okay, so yeah, problem solved. So this is the entry-level standard for no decompression diving. The full set of standards are here. So we've got one for entry-level diving, and then decompression diving to 45 meters, 60, 100, and then also a standard for rebreather instruction. So, as I said, problem solved. Well, not quite, because if we think about it, all of those things were in various agency standards over the last 10 years. You know, those deaths occurred when all of these things were in agency standards. So one of the key points I want to make is standards are great. We definitely need standards, but it is far from the only the only thing that we need. One of the conversations I was having over the lunch is that sometimes more standards and more rules can actually make things worse, not better, if they're not the right standards and the right rules, and they're not applied in the right way. So, no apologies for this, but for those of you that were here last year, I gave you a quote from this book, and I'm going to repeat it for those that weren't here. If you're an instructor, then this is a great book about teaching in general. Ken Robinson's got some really good videos on YouTube as well, so I definitely recommend you have a look at those. And his quote, come on. Okay. His quote are that too many reform movements in education are designed to make the system teacher-proof, okay? To take the instructor out and to standardize anything, to standardize everything. The most successful systems take the opposite view. They invest in teachers. They invest in people being able to teach rather than giving teachers more rules. And he gives an example from the catering world. There's two approaches in catering, two approaches to standardization. One is to standardize everything, the branding, what's on the menu, how the menu looks, how everything is cooked, logos. Most of you probably recognize that brand, except most of you won't be able to read any of the words on there, but you can recognize it because everything is standardized. Okay, but it ends up with food that is not very good, unhealthy, and personally, I wouldn't take my wife to this restaurant for dinner for our anniversary. I'd be in big trouble if I did. Okay, you might decide to, but I can see the look on her face. She's not going to appreciate that either. The other approach to standards in the food area is the Michelin Guide. So the Michelin Guide gives broad guidance on what a good restaurant is all about. It doesn't specify how you serve every single food. And there's lots of variation between different restaurants, but the end result is good food. Come on. Okay. So the problem is, and this was referring to the sort of traditional school system in countries, but I think it can be the same thing in diving. We often think, well, if we apply the fast food model of diver training, we'll have good standards. Actually, we should be adopting the Michelin approach instead. And this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone with a strong educational background, because standards are limited in what they can do. Okay, so this might be obvious, but I'm going to put it up here anyway. What standards do and don't cover. Okay, standards cover training courses. There are ISO, EN standards for training courses. Great, that's what we're talking about. There are, Martin talked about them earlier, there are standards for equipment. So there's a standard for your regulator. There's a standard for the rebreather and various other bits of equipment. There is a standard for how dive centers should operate. Okay, so that's how the business should be run and what information a student should get when they sign up for a course, those are things. There are standards now for the environmental responsibilities for dive centers. Okay, so they are the things that are ISO standards for. On the other side, things that there are not ISO standards for. There are no standards for divers. Okay, all the divers are different. You know, we can't standardize the individual divers. They're all individuals. It's so frustrating. It would be so much easier if we could just say, right, all you divers have got to do the same thing. You've got to be identical. There's no standards for diving. No standards for diving. There's standards for diver training, but no standards for you must do this. There's no ISO standard that says when you do a dive, you must do this. There's no standards for maintenance. You know, Martin's just given us a fantastic presentation and a reason an illustration of this. But yeah, there's no standard to say when a diver should be performing routine maintenance on their rebreather. There's no standard for when divers should practice, or how they should practice, or whether at all they should practice, or the environment that they're diving in. Okay, I've had a couple of conversations this week, and people have said, when we're diving in cold water, I've said, hang on a minute, what do you mean by cold water? This is not cold water. Come to the UK. Becky's talk about diving in an iceberg, that's cold water. So, we're diving in different environments. Our bodies are different. Health, we don't standardize the level of health of all of our divers. If we could say nobody who's unhealthy should ever go diving, that would increase the safety hugely. Decrease the number of people who are actually diving, but it would increase the safety. There's no standard for financial pressure. Who is trying to save money because they're a little bit short this month, so they're making a slight compromise on maintenance or changing their cells or gas choice? And there's no standard for diver attitudes. Some divers have great attitudes, and I know I'm preaching to the converted. The fact that you all took time, money to come here means that you're probably not the problem. But there are people that their attitude is the issue, or their attitudes or their beliefs. So the idea that standards cover everything is just plain false. The standard covers the training course. Okay, what about afterward that? So training course is a part of the learning experience. It's not the whole thing. Okay, so we have to think, when have we learned? And there's, I'm not going to go through it in detail, but there's a well-known idea in teaching called Kirkpatrick's 4 level of training evaluation. We ask people, how did you like that training? Okay, did you enjoy spending time with the instructor? Okay, yeah, great, so successful training. And then you go up, and actually, what we should be measuring, what are the results? Do they kill themselves 6 months after? Do they start doing the thing that we told them not to do a year after? But that's a lot harder. But that's what we should be focusing on. Because people forget. Okay, people forget. And this isn't new information. I haven't put the sources up, but I have in this case, because if you can read that, 1895. Herman Ebbinghaus in 1895 said that even if at the end of your lesson, the student remembers 100%, you do a quiz at the end of the session, they remember 100%. And then over time, that will drop down. And after a period of time, 20% retention. Okay? So we've gone through everything in the standard. They're only going to remember 20% of it. Okay? Now, I know, when we went through that standard, there's not a lot of fluff in there, is there, Mark? There's not a lot of stuff that's, superfluous. I think all of it is important, but we've got to decide which 20% do we want them to remember. That's quite scary. So the good news is that you can improve on that by additional repeated practice. So multiple attempts at the skill. So this is the curve if we don't do any practice. If we will forget. If we do a bit of practice, we can give ourselves a bump up. And every time we do more practice, we can give ourselves a bump up. It will still drop over time, but not as much and not as quickly. So, it's not just about the time that we spend with the instructor. And here is some proof of this. This was a study where it took 2 groups of students. One group, they taught them a basic psychology course, and the other group, they didn't. Okay, and the first group passed the course. Okay, then I think it was 3 months later, they gave both groups the final exam again. Okay, the group that had done the course and had passed the exam, and the group that hadn't done the course. Okay, which group do you think did better on the exam? It's not as bad as you might think. The group that did the course did do better than the group that didn't do the course, but only by a fairly small amount. The scores were 8% higher if they'd done the course versus they hadn't. So they only remembered 8% more than if they'd done nothing at all, which again is pretty scary. And the problem is that the way we structure our courses almost encourage this. This is a not unusual structure for a 5-day rebreather course. Theory, put the unit together on the first day, skills. Day 5, let's put it all into practice. We've done all the teaching now, so let's just practice it. It's just that one opportunity of practice. So, we're spending a fairly intensive amount of time with the instructor in this case. So in terms of, over a period, so these are the 5 days of the course, and we're 8 hours face-to-face with the instructor. Maybe you had a little bit of a chat the day or week before to answer some questions. They're a good instructor, so my door is always open. If you want to phone me up a week later and ask me that question, fantastic. Okay, and then they leave. They go away and they dive for a year maybe. And this is an entry-level course, so they come back a year later and say, I'm ready to go on to my mixed gas course now. And then a couple of years later, right, I've got my dives now, I'm ready to do my advanced mixed gas course. So let's extend that scale out. That's what it looks like, okay? I'm not sure if you can all see that at the back, but these little blue lines, well, that blue line there, it was the previous slide. So that's 5 days of contact time. That's the year later, and then a couple of years later, okay? And, these guys are going to be enthusiastic divers. So they're going to have this is a 10-year rebreather time. So look at all the white space. That's the stuff that there are no standards for. The blue lines, that's where the standards are. So we are limited in what we can achieve. So training is just the first point. Now, training is important, and you can always rely on Benjamin Franklin for a good quote. Experience is a dear teacher, but fools will learn at no other. So experience is great, but you don't have to make all the mistakes yourself. Okay, you can learn that turning on an oxygen cylinder results in an oxygen fire, or you can listen to Martin and go, that's a really good point, I'm going to take that on board. So training is a really effective way of getting that information over to begin with, but it is just the start. Then we need to practice. It's not just doing it once or twice. So one of my favorite quotes, don't practice until you get it right, practice until you can't get it wrong. Okay, so we need that practice. And then over time, practicing in different environments, we will get that experience, which is something you don't get until just after you need it. And then eventually, you'll get that experience. That experience will give you judgment. And another one of my favorite quotes. Okay, so we need to think about, we've done a good job with the training standards now. We've got this bit, but we need to make sure our divers are doing all of these other bits as well. This is a screenshot from In Depth, and I timed it just right to have the Diving Talks advert on the screen at the same time. So this is a full article on that last slide I've given you. So rather than doing a full hour-long presentation, you can go and read the article that I've written on that. Practice. It's normal in other areas. People will go to a driving range. Okay, I don't know why. Golf is a huge waste of time, and you should be diving. But if you're a golfer, they'll go and practice, or football training. Practice is an inherent part of those sports. But the idea of going and just practicing isn't as familiar in diving. We think, well, I'm just going to go diving. I'm just going to go and do it. Okay? Playing a game of football is a good way of getting better, but actually having a training session and focusing on some things is a much more efficient way of getting better in the long run. Putting that together, you get someone who's just done. So this is time and then the level of confidence. Okay? And they've just done a training course. They think they know everything. Okay? They are the greatest diver in the world. Okay, they're now going on the internet and explaining how rebreathers work to other people. So they've done the training. And then they start to do a bit of practice and they realize, oh, actually, I don't know what to do in this situation. So all of a sudden they realize, I don't know maybe as much as I thought I did. But then over time you build up experience and ultimately judgment and your level of experience improves, okay? But you notice up here, Experts still realize that they don't know it all. The beginners thought they knew it all. The experts realize they don't know it all. It's known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. If you want to know more about that, go and do a course with Gareth or with Pedro. And then, as I said, we can't standardize divers. These are some genuine quotes from divers that I've taken off Facebook in the last month, I think it was. These all come up. Why do I need to do rebreather trimix training if I'm already an open circuit trimix diver? Okay, I know I can do a calculation to work out exactly how much trimix I put into my rebreather. Same as I do calculation to put into my open circuits. Why do I need to do an entire course again? Okay. If you are thinking the same thing, short answer to that is open circuit is not the same as rebreather. Trimix diving on an open circuit is not the same as trimix diving on a rebreather. You will have an advantage, and you will be able to save about half an hour in terms of the calculations on your class, but there will be some other stuff in there as well. Why do I need multiple levels of training? Okay, I've done the course now. I know a rebreather works, and I did 7, 8, 9, 10 dives to 30 meters. Right now, I can go and dive to 100 meters. What's the cheapest place to do my advanced mixed gas course? Or mainstream agencies are only interested in money or the mass market. I'll tell you, and TDI is the largest rebreather training organization in the world. If we were in it just for the money, we wouldn't bother doing rebreather training. Okay, it's a tiny bit of our business. We do it because we love it. TDI is the heart of the organization. SDI is where the money is. Okay, so if we were interested in money, we wouldn't be doing rebreather courses. And actually, it's quite insulting. Have a chat to us in the bar afterwards, and we're here because we're passionate about safety. There may be some people, there may be some organizations that's true about, but I know for a fact it's not in terms of agencies and manufacturers. You talk to Martin, and he is passionate about diver safety. So these are, I think, mistaken attitudes. So what can we do about that? My plea to you is be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So what can we do? As instructors, one of my favorite phrases, and where's Peter from X-Ray? Peter's got an article from me on the X-Ray website called "Do What You Teach and Teach What You Do." Okay, if you're teaching one thing but then doing something different, in the real world, then you're misleading your students. Either what you're teaching is wrong or what you're doing is wrong, but one of those needs to be fixed. So for the instructors, and secondly, for those of you that are divers, is be a role model. Show that you are following the checklist, doing things properly, putting in the practice, opening your cylinder valves slowly. So there are things that we can do. To steal a quote from Gareth's workshop yesterday, which, to be fair, he stole anyway, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. Okay? If you see someone doing something, and especially if you're in a position of influence, if you don't say something about it, if you don't do something about it, what you're actually saying is, yeah, that's okay. Okay, so that's something for us to all bear in mind. Okay, so I've run out of time now, so I'm going to stop there. But yeah, if there are questions, we can pick those up. And I'm always happy to talk about this stuff in the bar later. So thank you very much.